Let me just give him a short introduction. So Edwin Valientes is an assistant professor at the Department of Anthropology here at UP. He has an MA in archaeology, being an alumni of ASP. He recently published an article on boat shape markers of Vuhus, and his presentation will be talking about that today. So I hope we're all excited to hear this presentation by Edwin.
Okay. Well, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. So, well, thank you, Anna, for the invitation. Parang wala lang akong nagawa kahapon until kanina para mag-prepare sa presentation na ito. Uh, um, so yan, I think parang pang ano ko na to pang pangatlo or pang-apat na binalot. So, well, I hope na you will find this interesting. Okay, so yun. So again, maraming salamat sa invitation for giving this brief presentation for the Binalot. So for today, I thought of sharing with you some notes that I gathered during this pandemic about the history of a very small but I think important island in Batanes, and this island is called Vuhus. The island of Vuhus is well known in Philippine archaeology because of the research conducted by the National Museum in the 1990s, wherein they found and documented a number of human burials marked with stones arranged in the shape of a boat. So, ito yon. Sorry. Yeah. So, ganito yung mga itsura ng mga boat shape markers doon. I'm sure also na familiar na kayo sa image na ito. This so-called boat-shaped stone grave markers have been written about by several people already, and most of what we know about the history of this island, Vuhus, came primarily from these archaeological features and the archaeological studies conducted mainly by the National Museum. But in this presentation, I want to go beyond these boat-shaped stone markers, hence my title, by looking at the other sources to expand or maybe to add details to our knowledge of the history of Vuhus Island. So these sources are mainly travel accounts by European navigators, travelers, or voyagers, and to some extent letters of Spanish colonial officials and Dominican missionaries that date back to the 17th to the 19th centuries. Well, if there's one good thing na nangyari sa akin during this pandemic is that I was able to find a number of non-Spanish historical sources about Batanes in several online archives and repository portals. And with the exemption of Dampier's account, which again is a very famous account, all these non-Spanish sources, at least the ones that I found, have not been actually referenced yet in any of the published books and articles on the history of Batanes. So, yun. So, kumbaga, ang dami pa nating pwedeng idagdag sa ating kaalaman about Batanes using this document. So, yeah, nung quarantine, lockdown, parang walang ginawa kundi mag-browse, mag-search sa internet sa mga online archives. Okay, so I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Batanes, but for those who are not, baka meron pa. Batanes is in the northernmost part of the Philippine archipelago, and it is composed of 10 small islands, the largest of which are Itbayat, as you can see in the map, Batan Island, and Sabtang. Okay. Vuhus Island is located between, Vuhus, the subject of this presentation, is located between the island of Sabtang and Adakay. There. And then the island is generally flat in topography with steep land formation on the west coast and sandy beaches on the east coast. Geological studies show that Vuhus is a raised submarine volcano formed during the Miocene and Pliocene age, or roughly 2.8 million years ago. And Vuhus is the largest, is the fourth largest island in Batanes. Yeah, so that's Vuhus Island, yung isa from Google Earth, and then the other one kinuha ko habang nasa taas sa eroplano uh, nung isang beses na umuwi ako sa Batanes. So it's a very small island, and yun nga, very well as compared to other islands sa Batanes ay unusually very flat in topography. So walang masyadong ano lang. Although pag pumunta ka doon may parang pataas pababa pero walang mataas na bundok. So yan. So it's a very small island pero ang daming mga information about this island from historical records. The local name of the island, which I've been nabanggit ko na kanina, is Vuhus, not Ivuhus as indicated in some government maps and in the archaeological reports of the National Museum. So Ivuhus refers to the people who inhabited Vuhus in the past. It comes from the prefix I, diba, or E, which means people from, and Vuhus, the name of a tree known for its hard but flexible wood used by the locals for making dowels to connect the wooden planks or the planks of their boats. According to the locals of Sabtang, Vuhus tree used to be very parang abundant in this island. Pero nagtanong ako kung anong itsura ng halaman na to or kahoy, pero wala silang makita eh. So di ko alam kung ano yung itsura ng Vuhus na ito, na tree. Yeah, so far, this is the island of Vuhus. And so far, we don't have any reliable information yet as to when Vuhus was first settled by humans in the past. There was an archaeological excavation conducted in 2002 in one of the caves located in the northwest corner of the island, and several fragments of red slip pottery were collected, but the antiquity or the age of this pottery materials was not determined. So so we really don't know yet kung kailan unang nagkaroon ng tao dito. Pero baka din, kasabayan na rin niya yung mga ibang isla sa Batanes, so mga around 500 BC to 1200 AD more or less. Pero syempre kailangan pa natin ng archaeological survey para ma-ascertain or ma-confirm kung kailan nga ba unang nagkaroon ng tao sa Vuhus Island. Okay. So the earliest description of the inhabitants of Vuhus comes from William Dampier. So this guy, William Dampier's travel account, A New Voyage Around the World, published in London in 1699. Okay. Dampier was an English explorer, privateer, and naturalist, known for being the first Englishman to explore parts of Australia and the first person to circumnavigate the world 3 times. Okay. So during his first voyage around the world, he made a stopover in Batanes. And while in Batanes, they noticed that the islands were, collectively and blandly labeled as 5 islands. Okay. So they took the so-called parang yung seaman's privilege to name the islands, these 5 islands. So Itbayat Island, as you can see in the map, the first island that they passed by when they entered Batanes was named Orange or Orange Island in honor of the Prince of Orange Island. Batan Island, where they stayed for at least 4 days, was named Grafton in honor of the Duke of Grafton Island. And Sabtang was named Monmouth in honor of the Duke of Monmouth. Adukay Island was named Goat Island because of the many goats that they saw there. And Vuhus Island was named Bashi after Basi, the term the islanders used to refer to their local beer or liquor made from the sugarcane juice, which they drink a lot when they were in the island. So Bashi. And later on, yung Bashi Island na ito, hindi lang ito naging pangalan na ng Vuhus, kundi naging pangalan na rin ng Batanes in general. So yung Batanes as a name for Batanes today ay actually mga lang yan Kastila lang yung gumagamit noon, Spaniards. Pero yung mga published maps ng France, sa UK during the 17th and 18th and 19th century. Ang pangalan ng Batanes ay Bashi Island. Okay. But today ay yun nga ay naging Batanes na. Okay, so Dampier and his crew stayed in Vuhus Island from August 13 to September 26, 1687. So almost 2 months or 41 days. They anchored their ship called Signet. I don't know if I pronounced this correctly, off the northeast corner of the island. So you can see yung parang yung sa Bashi Island may ano doon, may symbol na parang 7. So doon sila nag-anchor. Okay. So off the northeast corner of the island and pitch a tent on the nearest shore. So for almost 2 months, they stayed there fixing their sails and scrubbing or cleaning their ship. While in Vuhus Island, Dampier and his crew also interacted with the natives. So they traded pieces of iron and other scraps of metal for the natives' yams, pigs, and goats. And almost every day, they visited their village to drink liquor or the sugarcane wine. And it is from these interactions that Dampier based his detailed and very ethnographic description of the inhabitants of Vuhus. So yeah, so well, according to Dampier, the inhabitants of Vuhus and in Batan Island, at least yung village na binisita niya ng 4 days before they transferred to Vuhus, were generally small in stature and they had a round face, thick eyebrows, low forehead, small and hazel color eyes, short and low nose, dark skin color, and middle proportioned lip and mouth. Okay, so the men only wore a small clout or loincloth, while the women wore a petticoat or a wrap-around skirt, which comes a little below their knees. So some of them wore jackets made of plantain leaves, which according to Dampier was as rough as any bear skin. Okay, so and he also added that both men and women decorate their body with large gold earrings. Gold is called bulawan, sabi ni Dampier, pero baka na ano lang niya, mali lang yung pagkarinig niya. Actually, buhawan, diyan, buhawan, which according to Dampier is similar to the term used by some people in Mindanao for their gold. Kasi nung nagpunta sila sa Batanes ay galing na sila sa Mindanao. So this is I don't know, pero baka ito yung mga approximation ng mga nabanggit ni Dampier, yung kanilang jacket na made of plantain or banana leaves na parang makapal daw. So ito ay mga illustration ng collection dati ng Manila Bureau of Science sa Manila noong panahon ng mga Amerikano. So nag-collect sila ng mga ethnographic materials sa Batanes at ito yung mga itsura nila. So baka ito more or less yung nakita ni Dampier in the 17th century. Tapos yung nasa gitna naman, ito yung mga gold earrings, pre-colonial gold earrings na mukhang pareho dun sa description ni Dampier na mga large gold earrings worn by men and women. Okay, and ito yung mga extant na mga pre-colonial gold na sa collection ni Dr. Ferentino Ernedo, and some of at may mga ganito ding mga collection ng gold from Batanes sa mga ilang museum sa Europe. And then I'm sure you are familiar with the image dun sa pinaka-right sa part ng slide. Ito yung isang galing ito sa Boxer Codex, isang illustration ng mga Cagayanes. Okay, or baka mga Ibanag or Itawi sa Cagayan sa Northern Luzon. At makikita mo dito yung mga gold ornaments nila, lalo na yung earrings na mukhang hawig din dun sa mga pre-colonial gold na mga Ivatans as mentioned by Dampier, which makes sense kasi yung source ng gold ng mga early Ivatans ay sa Cagayan kasi wala namang madaming gold source sa Batanes. So they traded pork lard sa mga taga Apari or Cagayan in exchange for other items like gold objects. So yeah, so they lived. So again, from Dampier, they according to Dampier, they lived by fishing and farming. Men usually did the fishing while women did the gardening. Okay, they planted bananas, pineapples, pumpkins, sugarcane, sweet potato, and their staple, yam. They eat roasted locust, which usually dumadating daw pag October na sumisira sa kanilang mga pananim. And they also eat raw fish, kinilaw siguro, and raw goat skin na hanggang ngayon ay kinakain pa rin ng mga taga Batanes. They also had an interesting dish which Dampier described in the following way. So I quote it. Sabi ni Dampier, very interesting yung ano niya dito, yung description. Sabi niya, the paunches of the goats would make them an excellent dish. They dressed it in this manner. They turn out all the chopped grass and crudities found in a mow in their pots and set it over the fire and stir it about often. This would smoke and puff and heave up as it was boiling, wind breaking out of the ferment and making a very savory stink. The dung in the mow would look like so much boiled herbs, minced very small, and they too up their mess. They took up their mess with their fingers as the Moors do their pilaw using no spoons. So kung titingnan mo yung description, parang papaitan yung description ni parang papaitan na kambing ni Dampier dito. There was only one town in the island located on a rocky promontory, the back of which is a cliff that goes directly down the sea. So exactly ito yung mga nasa picture na ito. Yung picture na nasa itaas na colored ay galing to sa kasaysayan book na I think kinuha ito ng National Museum. So ito yung parang cliff at the back of the village na nababanggit ni Dampier. At yung photo sa baba naman na colored, ito yung parang rocky area na yan, yun yung mismong settlement. So there was only one town in the island located on a rocky promontory, the back of which is a cliff that goes directly down the sea. So the houses were very small, about 4.5 feet high, and made up of wooden posts and thatched kogon. Inside these houses, there was a fireplace at one end, and the floor was covered with wooden boards. So these houses were built on the precipices of the rocky promontory. So each precipice is fenced with low stone walls and can be reached from above and below through a ladder. So the remnant of this town or village, or Idyang, according to some locals in Sabtang, is located in the western coast of Vuhus in an area called Chuhangun, where the boat-shaped stone markers are found. So yung nakita niyong mapa sa slide, ito yung ginawa ni Kuya Ray Santiago, ni Sir Ray Santiago ng National Museum noon. Minapa niya yung mga walls na nakikita sa mga precipices o dun sa rocky area na yon. And if you go there today, makikita mo pa rin yung mga walls na ito. Sa Vuhus Island. Okay, and below the settlement, sa mga bahay na ito ay yung mga boat-shaped markers. So may chance talaga na associated yung mga boat-shaped markers dito sa settlement na ito. Although Dampier never mentioned about the boat-shaped markers, so baka hindi niya nakita itong mga boat-shaped markers when he went there. Okay, they had again from Dampier, they had weapons in the form of wooden lances, some of which had iron tips or head. Their armor was a piece of buffalo hide, which according to Dampier, and I quote, shaped like our carter's frocks. I don't know kung ano yung tsura nun, being without sleeves and sewed both sides together with holes for the head and the arms to come forth. This buff coat or buffalo coat reaches down to their knees, and it is close about their shoulders, but below it is a 3 foot wide and as thick as a board. I could not learn from whence they have their iron, but it is most likely they go on their great boats to the northern end of Luzon, to Luzon, and trade with the Indians of that island for it. And interestingly, itong armor na ito, for a long time parang kasi nababanggit din to ng mga Spanish sources, and then parang palaisipan, ano kaya yung itsura ng armor na ito? And then recently, I check yung online catalog ng National Museum of Taiwan, and merong isang parang meron silang ganong specimen. Ito 'yon. And they called it pagad. So this is in the collection of the National Museum, National Taiwan Museum. And according to the description, this armor belonged to the Tao tribe or the Iami in Orchid Island or in Lanyu. But then again, ang Lanyu kasi, ang mga taga Lanyu hindi gumagawa ng ganito. So they traded this one. They obtained this armor sa Batanes. So probably sabi nung yung iba pang description ng object na ito ay probably around the 17th century. So roughly around the time of nung dumating si Dampier sa Batanes. So pagad ang tawag dito ng mga Taga-Lanyu. But if you go to Batanes today, when you say pagad, it refers to the carabao or the water buffalo. Pero ang problema ay yung 17th century and even in the early 18th century, wala pang kalabaw sa Batanes. So definitely, yung raw material for making this armor ay kinuha nila sa Cagayan through trading. So can you imagine this, yung pag-travel ng object na ito? So from Cagayan to Batanes to Lanyu, and then eventually today to the National Taiwan Museum. So yeah, so siguro pag okay na yung pag-travel, baka yun, magandang bumisita sa Taiwan, and then I think I want to check this out to get some measurements ng armor na ito. I think baka ito na lang yung extant na specimen ng armor na ito, a leather carabao hide armor. Okay, while in Vuhus, Dampier and his crew witnessed an important event involving a man being buried alive as punishment for theft. Okay, so yeah, so kinote ko siya kasi medyo interesting yung narrative. Sabi ni Dampier, it is probable that they have some law or custom by which they are governed. For while we lay here, we saw a young man buried alive in the earth, and it was for theft, as far as we could understand from them. There was a great deep hole dug, and abundance of people came to the place to take their last farewell of him. So among the rest, there was one woman who made great lamentation and took off the condemned person's earrings. So we supposed her to be his mother. After he had taken his leave of her and some others, he was put into the pit and covered over with earth. And he did not struggle, but yielded very quietly to his punishment. And they crammed the earth close upon him and stifled him. So yon, so mukhang pag nagnakaw ka sa Vuhus sa panahon na yon, ay ang punishment ay ililibing ka ng buhay like this one. And interestingly then, dun sa French edition nung account ni Dampier, yung A New Voyage Around the World, it was translated to French. And then yon, I think they commissioned an artist para i-illustrate yung event na ito. So nakikita nyo dito sa slide. Although kung i-check niyo yung background, parang nasa Europe lang although nandun pa rin yung mga bahay nasa gilid ng bundok sa cliff. Pero yung mga depiction ng mga bahay ay parang European houses. Pero ito yan. So andun yung mother na na umiiyak, and then the Dampier's crew and the natives. Yeah, Dampier has many other interesting descriptions, but that will be all. I think that will be all for now kasi baka kukulain tayo ng oras. So yung Dampier's account na sa Blair and Robertson din. So if you are interested to read it, you can check it sa Blair and Robertson. So let us proceed now to another important account, and this is the account of the Serville in 1769. So after almost 100 years after Dampier, another European voyager anchored in Vuhus Island. His name was Jean-François Marie de Serville. And he was a French merchant captain working with the French East India Company. In 1769, Deserville launched an expedition to the Pacific with an aim to expand their trading network. So from India, they sailed up towards Taiwan or Formosa, passing through Batanes on their way to the Pacific. So M. Deserville and his crew anchored in Vuhus from August 21 to August 24, 1769, mainly to get food and water supply. With them was the book and the maps drawn by Dampier. So binasa na nila yung account ni Dampier. Kaya may idea sila kung anong klaseng mga tao yung nasa Vuhus Island. And also they have the Murillo map as part of their collection of maps in the ship. So ito so andito yung picture sa slide yung tsura ni Deserville, and then the other one yung mapa na drawing ni Deserville when they were in Vuhus. So showing the Bashi, the Goat Island, and then the western coast of Sabtang Island. And then nagdock sila between yung channel between Sabtang Island and Bashi, similar to the place where Dampier docked when they were in Vuhus. According to the Journal of Labe, the Labe is the second in command sa ship, okay, from the Serville. The people in the island are very docile. According to Labe, ito sa journal niya na published at may English translation na. So very interesting yung account na ito. So the people in the island are very docile and good people. So they wore clothes which they made just to hide their nudity. Both men and women had a woven cloak made of leaves, which he likened to a sheep's skin. So like similar dun kay Dampier. And then besides the gold earrings mentioned by Dampier, they had beads of various colors, which women wear on their legs, with one leg having more than the other. They also has numerous fishing canoes or boat. And then Labe also found two large boats which they use which the islanders use when they go to Luzon for trading. So the town was located in the southwest corner of the island and was well populated. So Labe described the village or the town. Sabi niya, I believe the islanders are afraid of sudden attacks by neighboring peoples, which is why they have entrenched themselves and built their town or village on the crest of the hill facing the sea, and built stone walls around them. There are ladders in quite a number of places to climb up, otherwise it would be impossible. So similar to the description of Dampier. So ito yung mapa na pinublished in 1787, several years ago after the expedition was done. But this was published in London based from the description of the crew of Deserville. So dito sa mapa na ito, makikita yung western coast ng Sabtang Island, and then this is Vuhus Island, and then this is the Adukay or Goat Island. So very interesting yung mapa, informative, kasi pinakita dito yung mga kabahayan. So like in the western side of Sabtang, so there is this village here, another one here, and another one there. And this is Vuhus Island, and at yun, pinakita din dito yung mga yung mga lugar kung nasaan yung mga bahay, like here sa Vuhus Island. Andito yung mga kabahayan, which is exactly the place where Dampier mentioned na may mga bahay. So yun, the people in the island, sabi ni Labe, the people in the island grew yams, sorghum, and sugarcane, which they used to make their liquor. So dito sa mapa, if we are kung i-zoom out natin yung Vuhus Island. So dito pinakita yung mga lugar kung saan nasaan yung mga bahay. So like this one dito sa area na ito yung mga bahay, and then kung saan sila nagtatanim ng sugarcane, and maize and plantain, and then sources nila ng tubig, at yung mga iba pang mga gardens nila. So, yun. Siyempre yung mapang to ay hindi ganun ka-accurate. Pero more or less, na may mga sila doon. Alam mo kung saan sila nagtatanim at kung ano yung mga itatanim nila sa island. While Deserville and company was in Vuhus, 3 of his crew deserted. When you say deserted, parang tumakas sa barko dahil ayaw na nilang sumama dun sa voyage. Deserville seek the help of the natives to look for these 3 deserters in the island. But because of poor communication or because of the language barrier, it ended up in a disaster. So Deserville's accounting of this event is worth quoting at length kasi very interesting yung parang pwedeng pang pelikula yung nangyari. So ito yan, babasahin ko na lang. So this is according to the captain of the ship, si Deserville, regarding dun sa mga 3 taong na parang mga deserter o tumakas sa barko papunta dun sa Vuhus Island, nagtago doon. So 3 men deserted here, part of the crew of our long boat. They had certainly planned their escape because when they went ashore, they had their spare clothes with them. So I do not know whether the islanders were party to it, but it is certain that they appeared never to understand anything when I showed them 3 men and made signs to show that they had fled and they had to be brought back to me. So they could see I was displeased, which puzzled them. Then they hastened to bring me the remainder of the pigs they owed me, and then asked me whether this was satisfactory by using the word mapya. So yun. So actually yung word na mapya is an Ivatan word na natandaan talaga ng mga crew na even after nila bumisita sa Vuhus ay part na ng kanilang vocabulary yung word na mapya as a word for good. So yeah. So using the word mapya, which is what it means. But I at once signified that it was not, and I showed them 3 sailors gesturing to show they had run away and that they had to be brought back. They did not seem to understand me. Finally, I decided to arrest 24 or 25 of these who were on board and have them tied up. And I began again my gesture to this because all the others had fled. And after making many gestures, we thought they had at last understood. I had most of them released and kept only 6 hostages. Those I had released seemed to have understood us so well that they asked us for ropes to tie up our men, yung 3 deserter, just in case makita nila. And we gave them some. They then called their boats, which were standing a great distance off and which indeed came to get them. So they left, leaving us to understand that they would bring back our men, but nothing appeared. However, several boats came back, some of which brought goats and pigs, which they wanted to give, making signs for me to release their friends. In the end, seeing that I was only wasting time, which was all the more precious to me because I had not been able to obtain water in these islands, I decided to release 3 of these 6 islanders I had retained. I gave each of them 6-foot length of cloth and they hailed a boat which came to take them. So tatlo yung binalik niya at iniwan niya, parang kinip niya yung 3 pa. So may 3 pa rin siyang hostages. So parang it's a classic parang miscommunication kasi akala ni Serville na naintindihan nila yung sinabi niya na okay, tulungan niyo kami na hanapin yung 3. Okay, andito yung rope and then yon dalhin niyo sa akin agad-agad yung 3 taong yon. Pero pagbalik ng mga natives, ang dala nila ay mga baboy. So akala ng mga natives, hinostage ni Serville yung mga kamag-anak para makakuha siya ng baboy. So yun yung so yun, so nung bumalik sila, baboy yung dala. At nagalit na si Deserville, parang hopeless na ito. So yun, release niya yung 3 and then kinip niya yung 3 natives na ito at sinama niya sa kanyang voyage to the Pacific, particularly to New Zealand. So ito yung naging route ni Deserville. Okay, so from Batanes, so bumaba siya and then umabot siya sa New Zealand. Okay? And then from New Zealand, nakarating sila sa South America. At doon nag-end yung voyage kasi namatay si Deserville sa South America dahil nagkaroon ng aksidente along the shore. Okay. So after the incident, so Deserville decided to leave Vuhus Island, taking along with them their three hostages from Vuhus. So while leaving Batanes, they saw a comet. Okay, so nung paalis na sila sa Batanes, gabi, may nakita silang kometa or comet for several nights. And if you do a quick Google search kung ano yung comet na lumitaw nung 1769, actually it was Halley's comet. So yeah, so mukhang accurate yung observation at sinulat ni Deserville. Okay, so if you are wondering, so just in case you are wondering what happened to the three natives from Vuhus during the voyage, ito yung mga sinulat ni ng mga crew dun sa kanilang mga journals. So one of the Vuhus native died of scurvy while they were in New Zealand. Okay. He died on December 25, 1769 and he was 22 years old though. Pero baka lang yan, approximation kasi hindi naman nila alam yung mga edad ng mga tao during that time. The other one died while they were sailing to South America, also of scurvy. So he died on February 20, 1770. The third one survived the entire voyage. So he reached Peru, and when the entire crew went back to France, he joined them and became an assistant of Moneron, yung isa sa mga clerk ng voyage. Okay. So if you're also wondering what happened to the three French who stayed in Vuhus, well, the following year, 1720, Spanish trader Joaquin Melgarejo went to Batan Island from Luzon, and while he was in Mananyuy, in the eastern side, the present Jura, in the eastern side of Batan Island, he said in his report that he met three French men who claimed they were left by their ship when they went to the island to get water. So mukhang obviously nagsisinungaling tong tatlong Frances na ito kay Melgarejo kasi tumakas talaga sila, hindi sila iniwan nung barko. So after that, din natin alam kung ano yung nangyari dun sa tatlong Frances na yon sa Batanes. Okay. So when Batanes was formally incorporated into the Spanish colonial dominion, the Spanish authorities tried to change the native political structure. This did not sit well to several village chiefs because this will undermine their power and privileges like exacting taxes. So one of the village chiefs who were not happy about this was Amandangat of Malakdang in Sabtang Island. What he did was he conspired with other village chiefs in Sabtang, including the chief of Vuhus Island, by bribing them with gold to kill a team of government men, like soldiers and some government officials, who were sent by the governor of Batanes to Sabtang to buy lumber. This year was in 1791. So yun, minasakar sila, and as a punishment for the massacre, Amandangat, the chief instigator, was executed in Basco in Batan Island while the others were imprisoned. And to avoid such incident to happen again, the colonial government in Manila sent a directive to the governor of Batanes to transfer the inhabitants of Sabtang and Vuhus to Batan Island, particularly Ivana. So ito na yung panahon kung kailan inabandoned na ang Vuhus Island na hanggang ngayon ay wala ng inhabitants. Okay. So the governor implemented it and saw the people of Sabtang and Vuhus transferred to Ivana, and they stayed there until 1841 when the Spanish government allowed them to return to their respective native villages in Sabtang. Those from Vuhus did not come back to their island but instead established their new home in Sabtang. So some of them probably opted to stay in Ivana for good. Baka nakapangasawa na rin sila, happy na sila sa Ivana. So ayun, stay na rin yung iba sa Ivana. So yun, but in 1844, 50 years after it was abandoned by its inhabitants, another group of European explorers went to Vuhus to hunt for deer. So ito yun. And while they were in Vuhus, so wala nang tao sa Vuhus noon. So sabi ni Mr. Adams actually, at Ibuhos, an excursion was planned to hunt deer. We started at daylight with 14 Marines intending to beat the ground regularly from one end of the island to the other. So, well, actually, gusto ko lang ipakita dito ay during that time ay may deer sa Vuhus Island. kasi wala nang deer sa Batanes. So at least dito sa account na ito, we know that by 1848, may mga deer pa sa Batanes. Siguro nagkaroon ng overhunting, so nawala sila. So ito ay galing dun sa libro na ito, Narratives of the Voyage of HMS Samarang. It's a scientific expedition. Yung goal ng expedition na ito is to collect various plants and shells and many others for a museum para pag-aralan. And then they also collected a lot of shells in Batanes. In the 1870s, Vuhus Island was made by the Spanish authorities as a leper colony. So all individuals in Batanes who contracted leprosy were brought to the island. So the Dominican missionaries built a small chapel made of stone for the lepers. So ruins of this chapel can still be seen there today. So if you go to Vuhus, nandun pa yung chapel na yon na ruins na lang. But later on, in the 1890s, the Dominican missionaries find the lepers' confinement in Vuhus inhuman and unchristian. So they decided to create new leper settlements for each town. And so all the lepers in Vuhus were transferred to the leper settlements of their respective towns. Okay? So yung mga nakikita niyo sa picture, ito yung Vuhus in the 1930s, taken by the Americans. Kasi parang there was a plan during that time na magtayo sila dito ng parang military base. So dami nila may aerial photos of this island, and these are just some of the aerial photos. So nakita niyo dito na yon, may mga coconuts, may mga gardens, pero walang permanent inhabitants. So more of the Vuhus Island. And today, Vuhus Island is a communal pasture land by the people of Sabtang. So if you go there, puro mga baka at kambing yung nakikita ninyo. Na yung iba doon ay sinisira yung mga ibang archaeological sites like yung boat-shaped markers dahil gumagala yung mga kalabaw. So I think so that's Vuhus from the 17th century to 19th and early 20th century through these photos. Okay, so I will end with that, Anna.
Okay, maraming salamat Edwin dyan sa yung masayang sabi mo 20 minutes. Okay. Thank you for that, Edwin. Ang saya-saya ng talk mo. I think rin naman malaking tulong rin tong may mga questions rin tayo about it. Dali lang ha. Okay. Will you stop your sharing or hindi na? Okay na yan?
Ay, sige. Stop na lang. Okay.
All right. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, if anyone wants to ask any questions, pwede ninyong erase your hand through the reactions button sa baba. Or you may also, and then we'll call you, or you may also type in your questions sa chat box. Don't hesitate to have a discussion din sa chat box. And also, you can also directly message Arturo or me to ask questions. Marami akong questions rin pero may nag-PM na sa akin. Ang tanong is siguro regarding sa entire Batanes, did all the present towns sa Batan exist back then, like Basco to Itbud?
No, what do you mean by exist? Well, yung ibang towns doon ay parang tinayo na ng mga Kastila, ng mga Spaniards kasi 'di ba kalat-kalat yung mga villages around each of the islands, and then nung dumating yung mga Kastila, so yung reduction parang they brought them down to a few towns na tinayo na ng mga coastal towns na tinayo na ng mga Kastila. But Itbud is definitely a pre-colonial settlement, and yeah, as well as yung iba pa. Sorry, pero yun nga, parang nagkaroon ng pagbabago na. So colonial, Spanish period na yung mga karamihan ng mga settlements sa Batanes.
When you say Spanish period, that's around 1700.
Siguro mga last decade of the 18th century. Yun yung yung ginather sila sa iba-ibang few places in Batanes.
Okay. Any other questions? Wait. May nagtanong rin dito, yung settlement patterns ba na nakita nung time na yon ay may relationship sa social structures nila that time? Siguro dun sa mga, like yung mga Ijang. I'm sure that marami ng mga theories dito, pero I'd like to hear your thoughts about it.
Well, yeah. Well, hindi ito nabanggit ni Dampier. Pero in other sources or archival sources, so medyo parang hierarchical, stratified yung iba yung society sa Batanes doon. Well, ayokong tawaging chiefdom like, pero yun, may ano sila may quote unquote village head or chief, and then below it mga sub or secondary chieftains, and then below each secondary chieftains ay may kanya-kanya silang mga hawak na tao. So yung highest, in fact may may term, ang tawag ay mangpus or mangpus, and then the secondary ones, mapolon or mapulun, and then the people ay yung tatawag ng mga commoners ay kumaidyan or kahilian or yeah, parang ganon, from the word idi, ili, mga ganon. So
kailihan, parang ano
yeah.
yung term? Kaidihan?
Kaidyan. Or kumaidyan, mga ganon. Or minidi, mga ganon. So yeah, it's stratified. So each so yan. So I don't know kung ano yung implication yan dun sa settlement pattern, pero definitely I think yung mga high ranking na mga families or mga elites quote unquote ay baka nasa taas ng bahagi nung village, ng mga hill settlements na ito, and then the commoners nasa baba. Which is quite interesting din kasi like in sa mga sa Vuhus ay sa Savidug, yung sa mga pinag-aralan ng National Museum doon, yung mga bahay sa taas nung hill settlement or nung idyang ay yari sa bato yung post. And then yung excavation na ginawa nila below the settlement ay nakakita sila ng mga post holes na yari sa, so yung post ng bahay ay yari sa wood. So baka yung wood for the ordinary people, and then yung bahay na bato, yung post niya, yung columnar stones na tinatawag ni na Doc Dizon ay para sa mga baka high ranking or elites nung village na yon.
Pero not necessarily kasi yung mga long houses, at syempre for more stereotyping, di ba? Yung mga may mga long houses ba doon, or may inisip ba sa long houses?
No.
Wala. Syempre pag sinabing chiefdom, ang una kong iisipin na the long house.
Well, parang hirap gamitin ng chiefdom na yon.
Yeah, exactly.
Siguro lang talaga, medyo loosely stratified siguro.
Yeah,
So yan yung pero yeah, pero yung mga bahay kasi maliit lang according to Dampier's description, and even from other historical sources, halos pare-pareho yung kanilang description of very small, with ang may fireplace sa isang corner, and then yung floor ay covered by wooden boards, and then walang windows, door lang, entrance, so very dark dun sa loob, pero actually kasi parang tulugan lang, kasi most of the time nasa labas sila, and they entertain visitors outside or within the house compound, not inside their houses.
If anyone wants to learn more about doon sa house structures at saka sa spaces ng houses, ay inaral to ni Edwin sa kanyang masters. So yung ethnoarchaeology of houses in Batanes. So baka mainteresado yung mga tao na basahin yun. He will be publishing it soon. He assured us na ipapublish niya yan. Sinabi ko na. Ayun. So may question pa dito. What is the history of Sungsong? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yes. And
Actually, well, kasi yung paano ba? Wala pa akong nakita na parang historical documents or accounts na mina-mention yung Sungsong. So, I don't know if ano yan
What is it?
parang
Sorry.
it's Sungsong is a village between it's a small village. I think mga 50 households or more or less yung nakatira doon. Tapos nakikita siya between Uyugan town proper and Itbud sa eastern coast, eastern side ng Batan Island. Very famous siya sa mga turista kasi ang dami mga mga uh, house ruins doon. Alam mo yun, parang overlooking doon sa isang highway, and then makita mo doon yung mga ruins na parang parang paano ba? Inabandon niya. There was a time na inabandon kasi nga parang nagkaroon ng storm surge or baka tsunami. I'm not sure, baka storm surge lang yon at nasira yung mga bahay. So since then, inabandon. But for the last 15 or I think or 10 years ay binabalikan na ulit at may mga nakatira na doon ngayon. Pero di ko alam kung ano yung niyan, yung status niya during the pre-colonial or colonial period. Kasi hindi siya masyadong nababanggit. So baka hindi pa nga siya nag-exist noon as a settlement. Baka very late na siya as a settlement.
Like post Spanish period. Na-interesado ako dito
Baka
sa
baka late, baka late.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Wala pa akong
Okay. Interesado ako sa concept ng Spanish period ay late 18 and last decade na of the 1800s.
Yeah, yung formal. Well, actually, since the 16th 17th century, may mga pumupunta ng mga missionary sa Batanes. Pero ano lang bisi-bisita lang. Pero yung formal na colonization ay 1783. Okay, yun yung tipong may parang formally na incorporated na yung Batanes sa Spanish colonial dominion. So very late in as compared to other places in the Philippines.
Iniisip ko rin to na parang always the question of chronology dito sa Pilipinas na and anywhere na pagdating sa mga isla, when you say colonialism or parang Spanish period, there's trade of course, pero in terms of influences, iba-ibang yung degrees of influences of colonialism doon sa iba't ibang mga places. For example, there, Mindanao, Cordillera, and even a lot of the islands of Pilipinas. So, natuwa lang ako doon. There's a question here. We mentioned earlier about chiefs. Of course, that's just because we don't have a proper term right now. Ano yung head? Ang tawag doon sa head? Sa head person?
Mangpus.
Mampus?
Mangpus. Mangpus, actually may ginawa akong paper trying to figure out kung ano yung meaning nung mangpus na ito. Pero well, that's very, very preliminary research. Parang mangpus, parang parang baka galing siya sa word na pus and ma or mampus. And pus is parang yun a proto Austronesian word for like manacle, to tie or rope, etc., or to punish, something like that. And in Batanes may word na puspus, or pinuspus, which is a rope, tali, and yung mamuspus is to force someone. So kumbaga yung role ng mangpus noon ay baka to someone to enforce or someone to force people to do something, and
or to bind a settlement together, a group together.
Not really, actually not really. Maybe someone who punishes people by tying them using a rope, and then kasi yung word na and then manacle, parang gapos, parang related din sa gapos, yung pus na
Interesting. Pero yung mga mampus na to, do you think na are they present in all the islands or per island is that parang one
I think
settlement, two settlements with two mampus, parang depende sa settlement.
Yeah, well, sa Batan Island, at least during the 17th century, parang maraming mga ID or mga quote-unquote mga independent na mga polity or groups, 'di ba? Parang and each one of them may sariling parang head or village head o yung mampus. Pero may mga ibang villages na mas malalaki, mas madami sila. So they tend to dominate other supposedly independent villages. Pero dahil minsan yung mga maliit na villages, di nila kayang i-depensahan yung sarili nila. So humihingi sila ng tulong sa mga mas malalaki. So kahit they tend to claim na independent sila, actually beholden sila dun sa mga larger villages kasi yon kailangan nila ng kanilang suporta every time na may umaatake sa kanila. So, yeah, isa din sa mga gusto ko rin banggitin na the mere fact na may mga armor sila at may mga spears and all. So, at yung design ng kanilang village or settlement ay basically nakadesign siya as a defensive settlement. Baka madalas yung warfare or yung awayan, inter-village conflict doon kasi they will not wala silang mga armor at hindi ganoon yung village nila kung hindi madalas yung yung conflict between villages.
At very strategic yung kanilang mga defense areas at saka yung mga yung mga settlement areas. Pero sino kaya yung mga umaatake? Or are there any mentions kasi traditionally alam natin sa mga works Sino yung mga, is it just an inter-island?
Not really inter-island siguro, inter-village or quote-unquote ED or polity, parang gano'n na kasi ang dami nilang mga very very detailed din yung information about their pre-Hispanic laws and regulations. So and in administering justice and how to resolve conflict. So may mga conflict between two subsections of their settlement. So ang mag-aayos nun ay yung dalawang parang sub-chiefs nun, mag-uusap sila. Tapos pag hindi pa nila naayos, i-elevate sa mampus and then siya yung magre-resolve nun. Pero kung ang conflict ay between two independent village, mag-uusap yung dalawang head nila, chiefs or mampus, tapos pag walang resolution, doon talaga nagkakaroon na ng conflict, away, warfare. Yun. May description pa rin. Actually may description din kung paano yung yung conflict na very theatrical yung interaction na matatawa ka parang away ba ito or para silang nasa stage. Very
para tong yung kwento mo about sa mga baboy at saka sa misunderstanding. It's also theatrical. So I think there's a theme. Yun lang I wanted to say.
Yeah, I actually have a question here in chat. It comes from Belle. First, she thanks you for your talk. Very, very interesting. But she also asked, when would be the best time to access some of your reading, some of your papers, your co-author papers, and what would be the best place to contact you? Would it be privately through places like academia.edu or sort of what's the best way to approach this?
Well, I think yung isang article ay downloadable via the ASP. Yung article about the boat-shaped markers. But the others, it's nasa ASP yung yung kopya ng thesis ko if you're interested in houses in Batanes. Pero yeah, I think you can they can email me kung gusto nila ng kopya ng thesis or other unpublished papers. Kasi yung karamihan na hindi pa published. Like this one, although may rough draft, pero may hinihintay pa akong isang document na sana ay makuha ni Janine sa UK. Which is another journal or from the Surveillance voyage. But this time, a thicker report on their stay in Batanes. So kumbaga, yung journals ni Labe and Serviel, although very detailed na, pero ito naman ay mas detalyado. So excited na ako kung ano yung nandun pa na information about Vuhus and about the pre-colonial Ivatan. So, and this author, itong crew na itong nagsulat, siya yung pinakamatata sa pagsusulat kasi sinama siya just to write about the voyage. And artist siya. So, ayun, baka who knows, baka may mga drawings pa siya about Vuhus. So yun.
Yeah, seems very interesting and very exciting, to get that.
Yeah.
Na ibibigay mo rin naman sa amin yung kopya ng thesis mo, di ba? Like yung PDF.
Yeah, di ba?
Oh.
Well, I think it's circulating around.
Okay.
Private.
In private Google Drives. Sige. May tanong din dito rin. I guess tanong rin, where can they read more about the boat markers and the burial ritual? Siguro associated yun sa tanong ni Bell na binention ni Arturo.
Well, yeah, marami na rin nagsulat. Maganda ding basahin yung mga published reports ni na Doc Dizon and others. Kasi yung article ko naman ay it's more of a review article. So I just summarize the reports of the National Museum and then try to make sense of the information and then provide somehow a not really new pero a different take on what has been said before about the boat-shaped burial markers in Vuhus.
Again, yung mga boat-shaped markers, hindi lang sila, you mentioned this before in your publication, pero hindi lang siya boat-shaped, di ba? They're also in different shapes.
Well, may ilan pero di pa natin alam kung ano yung function nila. May mga round and square. Pero well, sila Doc Dizon, sinubukan nilang i-excavate yung ilan doon pero there's nothing inside it or underneath it. So di natin
Still
alam.
Interesting. Not even post holes, no? So parang interesting pa rin na meron pa rin markers sa area na yun pero there's walang burials as you would expect it.
Walang burials. So and very interesting na wala silang like sina Dampier and even the
yeah, you would think
Spaniards
a prominent
na
one,
nagpunta doon ay wala din nila nakita yung mga boat-shaped markers na yun kasi they never mentioned it. So at baka kasi covered siya ng grass and then usually kasi ang sementeryo, ang mga libingan sa Batanes, hindi siya yung lugar na pinupuntahan at minemaintain. Talagang maglibing ka lang doon and then i-abandon mo na siya. So bahala na ang so kasi nga nakakatakot, parang it's parang perceived as a dangerous space or area. So hindi siya something na pinupuntahan. So baka nung nagpunta doon sina Dampier, yon baka covered yan ng vegetation kaya walang nakita. At dahil parang hindi masyadong pinapag-usapan ng mga bagay-bagay tungkol sa patay, sa cemetery and all that.
Yeah.
So then the locals never did not mention it to Dampier and to other Europeans who went to the island. So parang nag-exist sila pero hindi sila masyadong pinag-uusapan.
Oo, parang tabu na pag-usapan.
Tabu, yeah.
May question dito from Pao. Hello, long time no see. You look great. Love the talk. Did the Europeans talk about other prestige goods like carnelian and jades that's being traded in and out of Vuhus Island?
Well, yung mga dun sa account ni Dampier, puro ang nakita niyang mga ornaments ay gold. But Deserville, yung French account, and that was roughly 100 years after Dampier, may mga nakita na siyang beads. Less of gold, pero more of the beads. So may ganong pagbabago. So baka between Dampier's time and Deserville's time, nagkaroon ng increase ng access sa beads. So that was like between 17th century to the 18th century. So between 1686 and 1769. So nagkaroon ng increase ng glass bead, access to glass beads. Pero yun, feeling ko nakuha nila ito through trading with again with Northern Luzon, but at the same time kasi every time na pumupunta doon yung mga Dominican missionaries, marami silang dalang glass beads kasi yun yung madalas na hinihingi ng mga ng mga tao doon sa Batanes during that time. Beads and carabao hide. Ayun. And at yung trade ng mga tao sa Batanes ay pork lard. Okay, yun yung pinaka main trade item nila. So nag-aalaga sila ng maraming baboy at yun yung lard noon yung dinadala nila sa Luzon in exchange for beads, for carabao hides, and even of gold.
But regarding doon sa mga burial, iniisip ko lang to sa burial markers, and regarding sa yung binasa, yung mga burial markers ba na different marker, yung mga burial markers, they were dated at around 17th century na ba, or what's the date for that, yung official date for that?
Well, yung sabi ni Doc Dizon na mas
Porcelain
safer na date ay mga 16th century.
So that's based on the
isa lang
porcelain?
yun isang sample lang yun. So at medyo problematic pa. Actually hindi ganoon ka
hindi ito yung may nahanap silang candy wrapper sa ilalim.
Hindi naman.
Okay.
No. That's in another island. But sa Vuhus parang so kailangan pa lang mas madaming dating kasi dalawa pa lang. Yung isa problematic kasi ang date niya ay parang 19th century, late 19th century. At that time wala nang tao sa Vuhus kasi inabandon na yung island. The other one is late or 16th century. So pero who knows, baka mas bata pa 'yon. Baka may mga 17th century pero wala
so
pa.
Yung mga different marker shapes, hindi tayo sure kung ano yung date nun.
Wala. Pero I think associated sila kasi with a boat shape. Pero yun nga parang malaking puzzle ano yung function nila doon, yung mga square and round or circular.
Kasi with regards to dates, iniisip ko na may mga ang date na nasusunod na maaalala ko, but I'm not an expert sa Batanes, ay siguro yung jar burials na. Pero yung dated recently nila Bedwood and Doc, 120 AD yung safe date nila sa isang jar burial, and that was because nakakuha sila ng bone sa loob ng jar burial. But then may malaki kang hiatus between that. I mean, from our knowledge, so baka hindi pa lang natin nahanap, pero from 120 AD to 1500 AD, so parang ang laki ng time period gap doon, parang almost more than 500 years. So meron bang mga evidence na may use, or of course ang tinitingnan lang natin ay burials, wala pang attempt to date yung settlements rin, di ba?
Well, actually yung mga settlement, well, we know na nag-exist pa rin sila nung panahon nung dumating yung mga Kastila kasi nga nabanggit nga sila sa mga historical records. Pero yung kung kailan nagsimula yung mga settlements na yun, yung malaking question. Pero yung abandonment ng mga villages na yon or na archaeologically documented, more or less hindi mo na kailangan ng radiocarbon date for that kasi very clear yung mga historical record na by exact year kung kailan pinaalis yung mga tao doon at dinala doon sa mga bagong towns na established ng mga Kastila. So and that was between yung last decade ng 18th century. Wala akong matandaan exact year kasi iba-ibang taon yun Pero within that date range Pero nandun yun sa mga historical documents.
Okay.
So yeah, yung abandonment very parang madali nang malaman, pero yung initial settlement or yung creation ng mga settlement na yun yung kailangan pa ng archaeological study.
So yung Vuhus, parang pwede, ano na yung next step mo for this? Are you going to look at to excavate in Vuhus? Ano saan ka, where would be a nice place for you to study doon sa Vuhus? And ano yung magiging goal mo doon kung mag-excavate ka?
Well,
Miss
wala
Universe
pa
na
akong
tanong.
syempre yung magandang ano doon gawin ay to continue the archaeological surveys na ginawa ng mga ng National Museum kasi although 2 season ata sila na nagpunta doon pero at sa tingin ko ay relatively ano na parang extensive na yung ginawa nila na ano na survey pero sa tingin ko ang dami pang pwede na gawin doon especially yung ano yung dating ng boat shape markers. Pero medyo sa ngayon muna ay medyo nahuhumaling ako sa mga historical documents. Kasi daming pwedeng makuha information. So inaantay ko pa yung ilan. So actually enrolled ako ngayon sa isang historical methods course sa history department para lang matuto ako kung paano mag-handle ng mga documents na ito.
Oo,
So,
at saka yung interpretation, your historiography.
Kasi iba siya sa archaeology, yung training natin sa
Yes. May tanong rin lang ako, curious rin lang ako. When you also mentioned going back doon sa warfare, walang mentions ng or more stereotyping, Moro raids or even from the Spanish or talagang iba yung trato or iba yung tingin sa warfare doon. Parang
di ko alam kung may threat ng raid from the Moros pero sa ngayon kasi yung word nila for I think din to common din ata to sa Pilipinas yung wall na parang tinatayo sa seashore as a protection from storm surge. Ang tawag ng mga Ivatan doon ay muro I think from parang defensive wall but this time from storm surge. Pero di kaya related yun sa Moro kasi may ganun ding tinatawag ding Moro sa ibang lugar sa Pilipinas yung ganung
Well, the term Moro comes from Spanish.
Yeah.
Iniisip ko. Well, ang unang
Well, di ko alam. Yeah. So parang yun lang yung bigla ko naisip ngayon na possible indication na may ganong threat. Pero I don't know. Pero napakalayo na ng Batanes.
Yun nga Pero that said, yung Ilocos also has those stories, di ba? Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong sa ibang mga tao dito na from what I understand, hindi ako masyadong familiar sa mga northern towns. So, pero ang pagkakaalam ko yung mga northern areas din ay merong mga Moro raids. Pero syempre, Moro is very contested term rin kasi even in Mindoro ay inter-settlement warfare din sila pero ang tawag nila sa isa't isa ay Moro raids rin yung ginagawa nila even if they're all within the same with just different villages in the same island. Baka yun rin yung nangyayari. So interesting yan. Ang daming aspects. How about yung armor na ito? Itong ano yung tawag doon? Pagad.
Pagad. So baka originally ang tawag ng mga Ivatan sa yung pagad ng tawag sa mga kalabaw ngayon sa Batanes pero actually originally it refers to the armor lang. But eventually nung may mga kalabaw na sa Batanes, in-adopt na yung word na pagad to refer to the water buffalo. May gusto lang ako idagdag dun sa dun sa interaction nung yung hostage ni Serville yung mga Vuhus dumating yung mga taga Vuhus para ibigay yung baboy in exchange for the hostages. And then after ni-release niya yung tatlo at decided na si Serville na i-keep yung tatlo at isasama sa kanilang voyage papunta sa Pacific. May isang again din sa journal, hindi ko na sinama din sa presentation ko. May isang tao doon na nagpaiwan at may hawak-hawak na malaking baboy din. At nagpi-plead siya na ibigay niya yung malaking baboy niya in exchange for dun sa isang tao na hostage. At feeling naisip ni Serville na baka baka close relative niya yung isa doon, or baka anak niya or tatay niya. Kaya talagang nagpaiwan at nagmamakaawa na kunin mo na tong baboy ko at i-release mo yung si gantong tao. Pero siyempre si Serville hindi na nagpa-apekto. So, yun. Wala.
Hardened his heart.
Sa'yo na yung baboy, sa'yo na yung baboy mo.
Sa'yo
Pero
ang
very
baboy, akin yung tatay.
nakakatawa nung binabasa ko 'yun.
Lungkot.
Natatawa ako na medyo nalulungkot dun sa event na 'yon. Dahil lang sa miscommunication ay nagkaroon ng gano'n.
I guess universal din to eh. At parang napapaisip nga ako doon sa ating pinag-uusapan na rin namin at the background para maganda siyang short film din. Parang silent film.
So what is interesting about that incident ay 'yon. So at least we now know na at least by the 18th century or around that mga 1770 siguro, may isang tao from Batanes, particularly from Vuhus, na nakarating sa South America, sa Peru. 'Di ba? Parang maybe the first Ivatan to travel halfway around the world.
Across the Pacific Ocean. Pero gabi naman.
At nakarating sa France din kasi sumama siya nung bumalik na yung mga crew sa France at naging julalay, assistant nung isang crew doon. At wala na tayong nalaman pa after that. Who knows, dun sa isang document na hinihintay ko ay nandun yung details.
Why not, 'di ba? Parang pero ang lungkot na lang talaga nito. May mga katanungan pa ba mula sa ibang mga nanonood? Don't be shy. Ano lang to, chikahan ng mga. This is your chance to talk to Edwin because he's busy at wala siyang internet lagi. Okay. May tanong dito. Kailan na daw ang hukay mo sa Batanes? At so may tanong din ako isa pa. May tanong dito, kailan ang hukay mo sa Batanes at kailan sige, yun muna and then may tanong ako.
Well, I don't know. 'Di ba? Parang dami pang kailangang pagdaanan.
Butas ng karayo.
Funding, permits, and also
Kain ka pa ng apoy.
mahirap mag-commit. Pero syempre, parating nasa plano. Yeah.
Pero regarding this, and also kasi interesado rin ako, bago syempre last chikahan na to. Yung lengguwahe ba sa Orchid Island or sa Lanyo ay pareho sa lengguwahe ninyo? Lengguwahe ng sa Vuhus at saka sa ibang parts ng Batanes?
Well, related but not totally parang pareho or same language. Kasi nga parang they have their own language which yung mga linguist ang tawag sa language nila ay Yami language, sa amin naman Ivatan. Pero related sila. So like when I went to Taiwan, tas may mga namit akong mga taga Lanyo. So we were able to somehow communicate with one another. Naloka yung mga ibang kasamahan namin kasi parang two people na tipong hindi pa nag-meet, tas magkaiba ng bansa and all, tas biglang nagkakaintindihan. So yeah, pero marami akong hindi naintindihan. Pero siguro pag masanay ka na makukuha mo na kasi iba din yung accent, yung may same word pero iba yung pagkabigkas kaya minsan hindi mo agad na nakukuha yung meaning.
Ang interesting para sa akin ay parang parehos in terms of linguistic concept ay mas comfortable kayo mag-usap the same way that somebody from say Bicol will be comfortable to talk to somebody sa Southern Mindanao or something. So na parang ganun yung linguistic differences. May nag-comment lang, may mga pahabol rin dito kasi I wanted to ask about sa Taiwan pero may mga mentions dito. I from Marivic Del Rosario says that looking forward to much more research from Batanes on Ijangs, more boat markers, etc., which hopefully more young archaeologists will delve into. So that's you because you're young. So thank you, Edwin. Please continue to publish for us, the public. Wish I could go there to ASP when you go back. So good luck to all of you. There's a question here as well. Ano pong religious spiritual belief ng mga tao sa Vuhus? May info po ba sa concept nila tungkol sa afterlife? Salamat po. Nako, your favorite topic. The book that you will publish.
Well, in terms of historical sources, parang walang any information na very particular sa Vuhus. Pero daming mga may mga sinulat ng mga Dominican missionaries about the siguro beliefs or religion, quote-unquote, ng mga early Ivatans. Pero yun nga, yung boat-shaped marker can actually tells a lot about their belief system. So, yun na lang, di ba? So, contextualize mo lang siya sa Southeast Asian ethnology and archaeology, then you can come up with a general view of their cosmology, di ba? That, the mere fact that they bury their dead with or associate their dead with boats, so baka yun nga, may paniniwala siguro sila na after death maglalakbay sila papunta sa sa isang lugar kung saan nandun yung mga kamag-anak nilang namatay na noon. So kumbaga parang death is like yun nga, parang it's a journey to the land of the dead nila, but this time they use boat and they travel through by the sea, parang ganon. And then well, dito din dito papasok yung relevance nung Yami ethnography kasi very detailed din yung kanilang information about their cosmology na swak dun sa boat-shaped markers. Like they have a belief na pag namatay daw yung isang tao, yung soul niya lilipad from their house papunta sa banwa dun sa seaport, and then sasakay daw siya ng bangka and then papunta sa isang small island somewhere in South China Sea daw. Doon siya magstay for like several days, mga 7 days daw. And then may bangkang nag-aantay doon na mas malaki, Avang ang tawag. At from there, pupunta na siya dun sa final destination, which is yung tatawag nilang Island of the Dead or Malavang Apungso or White Island. So doon sila nagpupunta. Pero iba-iba yung minsan kasi yung iba, ang land of the dead nila, pag tatanong sila, saan pupunta yung patay? Pino-point out nila yung Batanes, yung direction ng Batanes as their land of the dead. So, going to Batanes. But others, parang they point out to somewhere in South China Sea or so may ganun silang So baka ganun din sa Batanes noon. It's just that it was not recorded in the historical documents. So kaya importante yung mga boat shape kasi yun yung parang material indication na may ganun sigurong similar beliefs or worldview sa mga Ivatan. And this land of the dead is so different from the land of the living, yung land
Yes.
And I think we have a couple late questions coming in. I have a question here from John Abad. And he asked about the live burial. How common were those? Like how common were those occurrences of live burials? Were they, I guess, sort of common? Were they rare? Like,
I think I think very common siya kasi hindi lang kay Dampier nababanggit din. It was this kind of parang event of punishing a person by burying the person alive. Nababanggit din siya sa iba pang historical documents, yung mga sinulat ng mga Dominican missionaries. Pero karamihan doon, bukod sa theft, sorcery. Isa yan sa mga pag if you are suspected na nagpa-practice ng sorcery, pinakulam mo yung isang tao, ikaw mismo yung mangkukulam, ililibing ka ng buhay as part of the punishment. Kaya yung accusation na mangkukulam, very serious yan sa Batanes even up to today and even in the past. Pero siyempre ngayon, pag inakusahan ka ng mangkukulam sa Batanes, hindi ka naman nililibing ng ng buhay. Iba na ngayon. Pupunta na lang kayo sa barangay hall at doon na kayo magbabaranggayan.
Binarangay ka na ba? May nakusahan ka na bang
Di pa naman.
binarangay? Okay.
Di pa naman. So baka hindi ako mangkukulang.
And sort of like
Ito pa nahuli.
sort of offshoot to that question. What were there other forms of punishment besides live burial that you know of, or I guess in terms of the historical accounts, was like that the only form of punishment that was noted in?
Yeah, bukod sa death penalty. So actually halos lahat may mga klaro yung mga yung mga batas nila. Okay, yung in fact very elaborate yung description ng justice system nila. And most of yung violations, ang katapat nun ay death penalty. But then again, there's a way for them to save themselves from this punishment. Like kailangan mo magbayad, okay? Ng gold. Or kung wala kang gold, kuha ka ng sponsor para bayaran parang yung ransom, parang and then yung nagbayad na yon na rich person, gagawin kanyang slave, quote-unquote slave or utusan. So, ayun. I think very common din yan sa iba pang parte ng yung tipong somebody will pay for the ransom and then in return gagawin kanyang alipin. May ganun din sa Batanes.
Yeah, very interesting.
Siguro pa mga last few questions na lang. May tanong dito. Naalala ko yung Dampier accounts mo before, and if baka may mga iba pang Batanes materials ka, baka nag-usap. With Testa de Ocampo and at saka did you read up or may mga work ba nag-collab ka na ba with Anna Melinda Testa de Ocampo? Kasi nag-work din siya on some Dampier research. I think she gave a BINALOT rin and she looked at the ethnographic accounts ni Dampier din. So I think she's almost publishing din, and apparently pero I think nag-focus siya sa Mindanao, pero baka I'm sure she also looked at the perspective niya as yung local perspectives of the peers work, so parang giving it a more localized perspective. So magandang tingnan yun.
Well, kasi makapal yung libro ni Dampier, di ba? Tapos ang dami niyang pinuntahan. So actually, ang daming gumagamit nung kay Dampier. Like yung mga tao na nag-aral ng Mindanao history, they also use Dampier kasi nga dami niyang description din about Mindanao. So, well actually, ang chinek ko lang, hindi ko pa binasa yung the entire Dampier account, like from cover to cover. So yung chapter na yon na about Batanes lang yung nabasa ko doon. So, and yun. So di ko pa nabasa kung may iba pang research na about So but it would be very interesting to read.
There's just some late questions coming in. May interesting to. May tanong dito, is there an Ivatan alphabet?
Walang tingin ko walang local writing system ang Batanes, at walang ebidensya so far na nagsabi na may writing system ang Batanes. So purely oral. Kaya ngayon, di ba, nang problema at hindi mamatay-matay pa yung issue ng standardization ng orthography ng Ivatan language today kasi nga again dahil wala ngang local writing system. So
okay din yung question about standardization, and that's a different topic, pero magandang ma-familiarize dun sa historical accounts about it para may nuanced or contextual basis to argue for or against standardization. There's a question here na I was actually going to ask this as well, na if you're digs around Batanes, are there evidences of rice cultivation and millet or possible early diets in agriculture? But in your map, you mentioned mais, sugarcane, and
pumpkin,
and bananas, and usually the bananas
pineapple.
But pineapple was what year yun? More.
Kaya nga, well, nabanggit ni Dampier pineapple, and that was 17 sorry, 1686. Yeah. So Dampier, sa tingin, so ano ba, nagkamali ba si Dampier na may nakita siyang pineapple? Malabo, baka familiar na siya sa pineapple during that time at hindi siya pwedeng magkamali na.
Tsaka yung mukha ng pineapple ay hindi yata yung mukha ng
Or
pineapple.
actually ngayon ko lang naisip, baka napagkamalian niya yung bunga ng pandan kasi parang pineapple yun. Kasi maraming pandan sa Vuhus at sa Batanes in general.
Yeah.
Yung bunga nun ay parang pineapple.
At ginagamit siya for basketry.
Yeah. So, I don't know, but it's either talagang may pineapple na or baka nagkamali si Dampier sa kanyang nakita.
Masasagot yan ng ating good friend na si Celine Kerfant, who's looking at the DNA of the plants in Batanes in association to basket making. All right. I think my last question, may question pa ba sa'yo, Arturo? May question pa isang last sa akin. All right. Okay, last question. Siguro pang closing na rin natin to na magandang thoughts regarding at 16th, you mentioned 17th century to 19th century, but taking care to also mention that the Spanish period was only up to the late 1800s na dumating. So during the 16th century, 17th century, there were people who were coming in. There are historical records from the perspectives of people who are not from Westerners or people not from Batanes, but looking at the settlements there. What are your thoughts on leniency towards Europeans versus close neighbors? I think yun yung tanong ni John Abad. What are your thoughts on the leniency towards Europeans versus close neighbors? So meron ba sila where they, I think if I understand correctly, parang may makikita ka bang differences or similarities sa how they treated Europeans versus the Luzones?
Well, ang interest nila sa mga taga Luzon ay purely economic, like trading. At mukhang kasi very limited yung yung resources sa Batanes. So feeling ko hindi nagkaroon ng interest ang mga taga Luzon na mag-migrate sa Batanes during that time. At itong mga Europeans na ito ay accidental lang, napadaan lang, or kailangan lang nila na mag-replenish ng tubig at bumili ng additional supplies of pork, pigs, goats, or meat, etc. Pero wala siyang, kumbaga sa punto de vista ng mga Europeans, parang walang economic value yung Batanes, parang daanan lang talaga. Pero very interesting na yung mga Ivatan, very welcoming sila sa mga, hindi lang ata sa Europeans, anyone na dumadating sa isla nila. Hindi sila ganun ka parang In fact, yun nga, nung dumating si Dampier and even de Surville, talagang malayo pa lang sila. May mga bangka ng pumapalaot at sasalubungin sila. Well, syempre, yung interest nila ay makipag-trade sila kasi feeling ko sanay na sila sa mga ganong dumadaan doon. Every time nakipag-trade sila sa mga barko na ito. And then, ang kailangan nila ay iron. Okay? In exchange for pigs, actually more than gold, iron. Kasi feeling ko nagagamit nila ito as a weapon. Kasi nga, kung madalas ang laban, ang conflict, so kailangan nila ng weapon. So yun, so very welcoming sila, warm. At sabi nga ni de Surville, parang pati yung mga babae, parang unlike in other places daw na medyo mahiyain. Pero ang mga babae daw sa Vuhus, wala, nakipagsabayan sa mga lalaki pag inom at kwentuhan. So kumbaga, yun. Tapos, yun, gusto nila na magkaroon nga ng even a relationship. Kasi during the time of Dampier, habang nandun sila, there was a time na biglang nagkaroon ng masama ng panahon. So ang ginawa ni Dampier, kailangan nilang umalis malapit dun sa isla kung saan naka-anchor, lumayo ng onte. Otherwise, ipupush sila nung waves para dun sa island. So lumayo sila, pero it just so happen na may mga 6 pa na mga crew nila na nasa nakikipag-inuman dun sa village. So hindi na sila makuha. So umalis na lang sila. So nung umalis yung barko, akala nung mga naiwan na mga Englishman, yung mga crew ni Dampier, ay tuluyan na silang iniwan. At itong mga locals sa Vuhus, akala din nila na okay, wala na kayong magagawa, dito na kayo. So ang ginawa agad-agad, inoferan sila ng mapapangasawang mga babae. At bukod doon, binigyan na rin sila ng lugar na pagtatayuan nila ng bahay at mga lugar na pwede nilang i-cultivate na land. So kumbaga, parang settled na sila na okay, dito na kayo. Mag-aasawa kayo ng mga taga dito, magkaroon ng anak and all that. Pero after a few days, bumalik kasi gumanda yung panahon. So bumalik si na Dampier para kunin talaga yung naiwan pa na 6 na crew. So naudlot yung naudlot yung ganong. So ibig sabihin kumbaga, it's an indication na very welcoming sila sa mga foreigners. Hindi sila aloof or
it might be interesting rin, I mean, kung titignan natin sa archaeological as well as when we look at it sa bigger perspective of Austronesian interactions. So the fact na parang itong island na yung Vuhus and even other islands siguro sa Batanes might also be considered as a non-economically viable area. However, for them they will accept people because kasi may space sila and they can always use some hands, 'di ba? I mean, hindi pa naman siguro safe to say siguro naman hindi pa overpopulated yung mga areas na ito noong mga panahon na 'yon. So you can always if may mga tao kang darating, edi this is your life now. So you can accept it or alangan naman magagalit ka pa. So parang ganun. Kung nangyari na yon, parang it is what it is. So magandang story and magandang perspective din yon, I think, Edwin, dahil ang gusto ko dito sa talk mo, it gives life rin. So aside from looking at it from an anthropological point of view, we're also an historical point of view. You give parang bumabalik to sa question of the humanities, the being human in the past, parang ganun. So yes.
Yeah, actually yung last na to. So kaya very interested ako sa Vuhus kasi napakaliit niya na isla. Parang and yet parang witness siya sa mga ilang mahalagang cultural encounters. It's between the so-called natives and the Europeans. So magandang tingnan yon yung encounter itself. Siyempre, bukod pa dun sa ethnographic information na naibigay ng mga accounts. So isa din yun sa mga gusto kong tingnan yung encounter itself, yung paano yung naging interaction ng mga natives and Europeans. So isang din yan, magandang topic na pag-usapan. Na medyo ang daming details na pwede kang makuha dun sa mga accounts na yun na hindi ko masyadong sinama dito dahil I'm more, at least in this presentation, mas interesado ako dun sa ethnographic information na pwedeng maibigay ng mga accounts na ito. Pero yun, lalo na we are celebrating the quincentennial. I mean, magandang balikan yun.
Magbibigay ka na ng talk doon.
So it's a small island na parang
with tumultuous history.
Yeah. Yeah.
As tumultuous as the waves around them. Trust. Ayan. Yan na yung susunod mong libro. Alright? Okay. Magandang point yun. I really like that. At parang nag-full circle tayo sa topic na ito. And also, it's a very nice point rin na hindi, when you talk about histories, you're also talking about it na in a historical perspective and anthropological, using anthropological methods, and also you may also use archaeological data, and hindi lang isang perspective ang pwedeng tignan. Maaari pang tignan ang perspective ng mga Europeans who were writing about the people, but also there's also the local perspective nanggagaling sa and ang magandang gumawa niyan ay tayo rin at even yung mga academics. So thank you, Edwin, for this wonderful talk. Nag-text lang sila Grace at saka sila Dr. Paz na pasensya na daw hindi sila nakapunta. They really wanted to listen, so nagtatanong sila kung may recording ba daw. But Thank you very much for this wonderful, wonderful talk. Next week, our speaker will be also from the UP Anthropology, but this time ang focus ng kanyang research ang kanyang talk ay tungkol sa kanyang recently concluded research, Gawa at Gayak, Diskarteng Becky sa pang-araw-araw na buhay sa isang bayan sa Batangas. So this is the result of her ethnographic studies sa Batangas, and Edwin kindly introduced us to her. And ang panghingi namin ay mag-talk si Edwin nun. We will see you again next week at the talk will be at 10 a.m. So wait for that, and you can check out the BINALOT Talks Facebook for the poster and for the meeting code and password. But for now, we would like to thank everyone. Thank you, JJ, as well for co-moderating. Thank you to Ara for the tech. Thank you to everyone who asked questions, and thank you for the lively discussion. And most of all, thank you, Edwin, for this lecture and discussion. Ingat kayo. Take care.